Happy holidays, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the best of all things men. First off, let me say we had a great year with some amazing guests. If you got a chance to see the shows, you know exactly what I mean. If not, well, here are some of the interviews that made this season so great. Enjoy. Adam, let's go back to the days of yesteryear. You are the son of famous people, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr., the first black congressman from New York, a big deal because my mom is from New York. He was a big deal at our house. And your mom, Hazel Scott, star of stage and screen and famous pianist. Let me ask you this. When did you first realize they were special?
When do I know they were a little different? Well, I remember the night I was allowed to stay up late to watch the news. This would have been 1954, so I was 8 years old. And NBC in New York had a 11 o'clock anchor who was one of these old-fashioned stylized guys. And he would always begin his program by saying, "What kind of a day has it been? It's been a day that President Eisenhower told the communists he would not really," that kind of thing. And everybody used to make fun of him. But this night, they allowed me to stay up because I knew my father had been away and he was home again. And so at 11 o'clock, they began, "What kind of a day has it been? It's been a day that Adam Clayton Powell returned to Washington, D.C. to a hero's welcome." Whoa.
Nice.
He was the beginning of the newscast. And it was the day that he had returned from Indonesia from the Conference of Non-Aligned Nations, where Eisenhower and the State Department had tried to persuade him not to go. Instead, he got press credentials and reported. He filed reports for the black press, but he also surprised everybody in Indonesia at the conference by saying, "Yes, the United States has a race problem, but we're working on it. In Russia and China and other communist countries, they're not working on it. And they also have race problems."
Your mother was the first African-American host of a TV show way back in 1950. That's before Nat Cole, that's before Oprah, before anyone. What was that like?
Well, she was still just mom to me, except I knew that she came on TV at 7:45 in the evening. And occasionally I would be able to go down and go to the studio with her in Midtown Manhattan and watch her do her show. Now, what I didn't realize until very recently, when a book came out about her show and about a few other shows that were on in the early 50s, is that some people say that my mother actually invented the television variety show. That the things that were done for that program and things that were invented for that program became standard for people who came later, Perry Como, Nat Cole, and others who had the variety shows in the 50s. For example, her show was the first show where the director was able to shoot the piano keyboard diagonally instead of horizontally. Now we can do that electronically very easily. But at the time, it meant they had to take a pedestal camera, those big, heavy pedestal cameras, and tilt it to get that shot.
Adam, we're both brothers in that we both worked at CBS. Tell me, how did that happen for you?
Well, in my freshman year as an undergraduate, I had complained about the news on a radio station. I'd never done this before, but I'd heard a newscast where they said that Black nationalist leader Malcolm X would no longer accept. I'm thinking, who's Malcolm X? Malcolm X. Malcolm X. And I realized, oh my goodness, he's talking about Malcolm X. He probably hit that script cold and didn't have time to catch himself. So I said, I'd never done this before, but I'm going to actually go down to the Boston phone book and look up the phone number of that radio station and complain. And it turned out that when I went to the phone book, the radio station was right on Memorial Drive. It was right on the MIT campus. It was the MIT radio station. And I went down and knocked on the door and I said, "Your jazz is terrible and your news is worse. Are you a student here?" I said, "Yes." "Oh, come in." And by the time they finished with a PR sales job, I had agreed to do the 6 p.m. Tuesday night news sponsored by Muriel Cigars. But I really had no journalism in my background. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew what I wanted it to sound like. And so I called a friend of my parents who was had been out of work for years, who was a well-known journalist, had been out of work for years. I called him at home in New York and I said, "Look, can I buy you coffee or something and you can help me learn this journalism thing and so I don't embarrass myself?" And he said, "Sure, the next time you're down in New York on vacation, give me a call. But I should tell you, I get to work now at 4 in the morning. I have a job. I'm at CBS News." I said, "Oh, great." And his name was Mike Wallace.
With more and more people of color performing and being recognized in the genre of opera, what do you see for the future of opera and the impact it can have on Black music?
When I was growing up, I wondered if there was I didn't even know that there was a world of opera. And when I was introduced to opera in college and learned that part of my gift was that I could sing opera, it opened the world to me. What I didn't realize is that there were not a lot of Blacks and people of color accepted into opera. And so I went in it thinking that the playing field was going to be even. And then I realized that it was not even. And so it was a struggle at first to gain acceptance. But what I realized was that talent equalizes things, because while they may not want me to come through the front door and I go through the back door, once I get on stage and I sing, then all of a sudden the barriers begin to come down. And that certainly happened with Marian Anderson, Leontine Price, some of the great opera singers. And a lot has to do with the Black Lives Matter movement. I think a lot of organizations are realizing the structural racism that is still prevalent in their organizations. And many are beginning to now look at the way their structure is in their organization and say, hey, we need to change this. We need to have more people at the table. And so I'm involved in a lot of that in different organizations to just try to bring more people to the table so that young kids who are coming up and going to the opera will see people like them on stage. We'll see people like them conducting the orchestra. We'll see people like them in the orchestra. And so that's when great change is really going to happen, when we have more diversity in all facets of the performing arts, and certainly in the administration areas of the performing arts.
We're back with the best of all things men. Mickey, your debut album, Remember Her Name, is an out-of-the-park home run.
Oh, thank you.
Let's talk about the song Black Like Me. That's the song that drew me in to you. That's the song that introduced me to you. I saw you sing it on the Grammys in front of zillions of people. Right before you went on, were you nervous? What went through your mind?
I was so nervous. I had just had a baby a month prior to that. And so what was nice about the set was I was in a performance with other women of country music that I knew. So it felt like I wasn't alone. And also I had a beautiful Black choir behind me and And it was just such a truly beautiful moment. Like I felt like I was supported. So as nervous as I was also really excited, and I felt uplifted, and I felt like I had my people with me. And that was just really, really cool.
I remember when I covered the CMAs, I covered 16 of them. It was me and Charlie Pride when you looked around the room.
That was
What's
it.
it been yeah, what's it been like for you?
Well, first, before there was me, there was a woman named Reese Palmer. And she was the reason when I decided that I wanted to pursue a country music career. I saw Reese and I thought, oh, I can do this then. Like she's there. And before her was Linda Martell. And, it's been a beautiful, difficult, challenging, amazing journey now that I'm finally being able to put out a record. It was hard. I battled a lot of things. I had a lot of self-acceptance issues because you're in a predominantly, let's face it, you're in an all-white industry. It is all white. And to be a Black woman in that, and all the girls have blonde hair and blue eyes, or they're brunette with blue eyes. There's something, and I didn't fit that look. And so that was really, really difficult for me to try to navigate. But now I'm so excited that I'm Black and singing country music, and that I can open the doors for other Black girls that want to sing something besides just R&B, which is that's where we are put.
Mickey, Black people were not supposed to like country music. I didn't get that memo. I liked it from the beginning. And
Me
you
too.
you did not get that memo either. Tell
I did
me,
not get that memo.
Bill, is it true that Chuck didn't really want to be a rapper, that you had to talk him into being part of Def Jam?
Yes, Mark. Again, we loved radio so much and had such a great time. When we started our college radio show, and just to give a little bit of flavor, this is the early '80s, and still, I again reference, Frankie Crocker being so dominant as an influencer. He was the program director and chief radio personality on WBLS, which was the top rated FM radio station in New York City at that point. And by default, that made it the top rated music radio station in the country. So, we all wanted to be Frankie Crocker. We looked for that point, and where we didn't get to be Frankie Crocker, we said, maybe we can be Mark McEwen. So, either one of those destinations seemed to be more real and apparent. Hip hop is just developing. Our big stars were the guys on the radio. So radio was really the target for our careers. So even when there were opportunities offered at radio stations, I pursued the opportunity to work for much less money for Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons as they were launching Def Jam Records. And one of my obligations and directives from Rick Rubin was to sign my friend Chucky D. Rick thought he had a great rap voice and would be incredible, and that it would be my mission to bring him as a part of the Def Jam roster.
We recently lost another icon, Paul Mooney. You worked with Paul Mooney. Two things. Do you remember when you first met, and how did you two work together?
Yeah, my wife Tanya, who's worked in the music business who had worked in the music business and worked with me at our label Stepson Music, had been a huge Paul Mooney fan. And she implored me as I was launching, and we were launching Stepson Music, to reach out to Paul. I really got the nerve, and we got the information to call him and let him know that I was coming by and I wanted to speak to him after one of his routines, which I did. And we struck a bond from that moment and worked together for 10 years to record 3 albums, 2 that we did release, and one, especially Race, being one of the most critically acclaimed comedy albums of all time. But Paul, his brain, there are certain folks on the planet, their brains just process culture and life so differently. He definitely was one of those. Pryor, Dave Chappelle, the great Chris Rock. There are folks that their lens is just so different. Thank you for that again, Mark. Thank you for your pioneering. Not many folks know that there was a period, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, for radio and for rock and roll radio, where it was non-diverse, to be quite polite about it. And there are very few folks who someone like me could look up to as someone who did it and did it on such a high level. I know everyone remembers you for TV and what you're doing today, and that's fantastic. But man, Mark McEwen on the radio, there are a generation of us who can cite your success as an influencer for our own success.
Thank you, Bill. You're going to make me cry. Thank you so much. All the best to you, my friend.
To you as well, my friend. Thank you so much.
For those of you who didn't know, in 2005, I suffered a massive stroke. It took me years to recover. When COVID showed up in 2020, having this underlying condition made things that much more concerning for me. And that's why I made the choice to get vaccinated. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I can only tell you what I did. I can also assist with getting out good information that can help you make the best decision for you and your family. And along with my guest today, that's exactly what we're going to do. Tell me about the misinformation you found and how do you address it?
Well, one of the things that we found is there's so much noise out there in the news and the facts that it's really created a lot of confusion for folks. And I'll tell you, it's created confusion for folks that look like you and look like me. Now, it's also created confusion in other ethnic groups as well. White, Caucasian, Hispanic, Latinx, American, indigenous population, Asians. But it's really important that we figure out how to address that among Black African Americans. And if you can't do it everywhere, do it where you can. So I decided that in the midst of all this, we had to do something. And I decided to go ahead and just start figuring out ways to talk to the community and communities, if you will, of people in Central Florida about what was going on.
And what do you tell them?
I tell them that this is a virus that is killing people, and it doesn't care about your politics, it doesn't care about your religion, it doesn't care about your race, it doesn't care about anything about you. If you get it and you don't have some form of protection, there's a strong likelihood that it's going to make you significantly ill or seriously ill, requiring hospitalization. And if you find yourself in a hospital, sometimes you don't come out, you can die. I don't do this for any recognition, but somebody's got to get out there and create a band, if you will, that's going to start carrying this message. There's too far few of us out there. I'm sorry to say this, but we should have Black physicians and brown physicians around this country carrying flags, dispelling the myths and mistruths about COVID-19 and the vaccine. We should have black and brown physicians and other healthcare providers around the country talking about how do we improve the health and well-being and status of people who have diabetes and hypertension and heart disease, and talking about how we start to break down those barriers that keep us from getting the type of care that we need in healthcare to live longer. I'm tired of being told that I'm going to die sooner than my white counterpart or my other. I want to gain back the years. And you know what? COVID actually took 2 to 3 more years off of the black man's lifespan. I want my time back. And I want your time back. And I want to make sure that we're doing and saying everything we can to get our lifespan back.
Dr. Michael Bivens, thank you so much for being on All Things Men. And for 18 years, you've been a member of the team of doctors at Urology Centers of Alabama. Plus, just this year, you were announced as president of Urology Centers of Alabama. Doctor, I could read forever. You have all kinds of things. Why is prostate cancer so prevalent in African American men?
Well, that's $1 million question too. And, there are a lot of research going into that. I've been involved in some research projects, ongoing research projects that's trying to answer that question. The short answer is we really don't know. The speculation is it's probably genetics. We think environment may play a small component, but we think genetics probably play a larger component. But we do know that African American men carry 2 times the risk of having cancer. And we also know that the cancer tend to be more aggressive in African American men. And African American men typically, when they are actually diagnosed and treated, they typically will have higher volumes of cancer. So this cancer does affect men, black men, in the diagnosis, in the way it acts within black men, and it also kills black men at a higher degree.
You mentioned fishing. Why is that not against the law?
Technically, it is against the law for the most part, just like certain spam is against the law. The problem is that most of these phishing attacks and spam attacks are coming from overseas, countries that do not have a cybersecurity policy or internet usage policy, across the board. I don't want to mention some of these countries, but these particular countries, they operate in a silo. They do not have any advanced or mature type of laws or policies. So again, individuals from those particular countries are able to move and do these particular functions.
The lyrics for a lot of your songs are DBA and IT. I'm in love with an IT girl, but the music is very Atlanta sounding. Tell me also about that.
Well, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've always been a fan of music. And the time where, when I was really into music, Atlanta was making a huge transition. LaFace moved to Atlanta. One of my good friends, who I'm still good friends with today, Shanti Doss, who was huge in the music industry, she worked at LaFace Records as a executive vice president of marketing. And she was responsible for marketing Outkast, which my sister was a good friend of Outkast. The first time I met Andre 3000, he was in my parents' living room.
All Things Men, that's what it says on the screen behind me. But one of the most important things to many of us guys are the women in our lives. They could be your mom, a grandma, or a sister. Maybe it's your significant other, your daughter, or a good friend. Well, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And for every guy watching this right now, I can guarantee you there's a woman in your life scared to death of getting it. And don't be fooled. Men can get it as well. That's something we rarely hear about. Today I have 2 great guests with me. One a physician and the other a breast cancer survivor. So let's talk about it, because cancer-free is something we all want to be. Warren, I have to ask you about being the first African American elected as president of the American Academy of Family Physicians. Tell me about that.
I was elected at the end of 1999. Okay, it was beginning of the year 2000, and I took office in 2001, right after 9/11. Okay, at the time I was a candidate, there were people who told me the academy isn't ready for a Black leader. And what I said to them, I don't want the academy to be ready for a Black leader. I want the academy to be ready for me to lead. I did not ever lose sight of the fact that I was Black, but I wanted people to look beyond the obvious at the skills that I had. Now, I took office less than 2 weeks after 9/11. And what were we in? We were in this really topsy-turvy period of being frightened about chemical warfare and about attacks in our communities. And I had to help our family physicians to become the public health sentinels for their communities, to help people to learn how to deal with whether it was a anthrax exposure or something like that. You know, I got to tell you that 20 years later, another Black man was elected president of the American Academy of Family Physicians, 20 years later. And guess what conditions he had to deal with? He had to deal with COVID. And he was followed by a Black woman who was elected as president. And guess what she had to deal with? Not only COVID, but she had to deal with the Delta variant. I don't know what it is that when we finally get to points of leadership, we have these really unbelievable issues with which to deal.
Your twin sister, they may not know, passed away 2017?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
We were 2 minutes apart. Everyone knew Janet and Maria. She was the light in my eye. I never thought I would love anyone more than her until I met my husband. And I never thought I would love any more than Janet and Michael until we had our boys. But it was always Janet and Maria. We played high school volleyball together. We went to Hampton University together. Friends would come up to us and say, "How many of you are there?" Because we were just all over that campus. I knew when Janet was diagnosed in 2001 with breast cancer that I was just, every day was a gift with her. Friends would complain sometimes because I would literally drop everything for her, and they would say, "Well, let's plan a trip together." I'm like, "No, I'm traveling to go see Janet." You know, if the phone rang, it was Janet. I talked to her every day. And I don't think I really understood that one day there would be a life without her, but I knew that I wanted to make the most of my time. So my children only knew that there were two of us. They never really imagined, Maria without Auntie Janet, and her daughters had me. Auntie Mommy is what they called me. And I can't explain, except my best friends who are also twins, it's a gift. Having a twin is just the most amazing thing.
As a father of twins, I know exactly what you're talking about. Politics, simply put, is the decision-making process by which who gets what is determined. And for generations, Black Americans have fought and died to have a seat at that table. Today, the impact of Black women and women of color in politics is so great, they've been labeled the backbone of the Democratic Party. But what about Black men? Well, my guests today are here to answer that question, as well as encourage more black men to get involved in the process. Because, as a wise man once said, we are the change we seek. Alan Ellison, thank you so much for being with me today on All Things Men. Alan, you mentioned your interest in public service was directly tied to the work your mother did with the disabled. What work did she do, and why did that have such an impact on you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, and thank you for that question. When I was a kid, my mom would often take me to her job. And one of the things that she would do on her job was she would teach people with disabilities how to live on their own. And oftentimes I got a chance to see and get to know people who others would see as like some type of burden or something like that. And I got a chance to just know who they were as individuals and learn that, you know, they have special gifts, special abilities. And I began to just see them as just, you know, any other human. And so for me, it taught me that, you know, we have to be able to look past people's exterior, look past the surface and see a person for who they are. And for me, I just, you know, I've always kind of like been that kind of person who would always try to find the good and the positive inside of each and every person.
Well, you talked about your mom. Let's talk about your dad. You say you got your determined and dedicated work ethic from him. That's one thing I want you to talk about, but also talk about the deal you made with him when you were 11.
Yeah, so my dad, he was always pushing me to be better, to be greater. And, you know, he told me, he said, Alan, you can have whatever you want, but you're going to have to earn it. So I had to always work for everything that I got. When I was a kid, I must have been about 11, 12 years old. I used to work with him on cars. He painted cars. He was a mechanic. And so he told me to take out, you know, an engine out of a car. And, you know, the 12-year-old, I don't know how to take an engine out of a car. But he gave me all the tools that I needed, and that was like a summer project. So I ended up taking an engine out of a car. But I also did other things with him, like I would wash cars, I would cut grass. And, you know, it seemed that it was harsh because I never got paid anything. He just kind of just worked me. He said, I put a roof over your head and I feed you. That should be payment enough. But and then this one time he made a deal. He said, listen, I want you to learn how to play the piano. And he said, if you learn how to play 2 songs by Christmas, I would get you a go-kart. And so I learned how to play This Little Light of Mine and Amazing Grace. And I thought that was the end of that, but I didn't know that he was going to actually go and start a church, and I would end up playing the piano ever since.
You said 16% of African American in that community. Mayor, if you had every vote from them, you wouldn't have won. You had to reach all kinds of people. How'd you do that?
Well, just relationships. You know, I was fortunate in our high school. You know, we had Black, white, Latinos in our high school, the historic Waterloo East. I have friends throughout this community. I've worked and partnered with the NAACP to the community colleges and the colleges. So I've been fortunate to have a diverse experience base and to work with people to actually get things accomplished. You know, my parents came to Waterloo, Iowa from Mississippi to escape the turbulent times in the 50s and the 60s to come to Waterloo for work. And so, you know, they just raised me to outwork anyone that I'm around, to develop partnerships that are all throughout this community, and to judge people by the content of their character. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not conscientious to the plight of African Americans and what we've faced over the years, but I think strategically understanding how to address our issues and get other people involved to starting to do that is something that I've been able to learn throughout my course of my life.
Orlando, Florida is not just the place I call home, it is also one of the world's top vacation destinations. Every year, millions of people visit the City Beautiful to enjoy our world-class theme parks, other tourist attractions, and our vibrant local scene. Sadly, in 2020, we had to shut the whole thing down, and you know why. But today, we're bouncing back, and you're about to meet the man who's tasked with keeping it all together. And with all of that, he still finds time to be the biggest cheerleader for his wife, Congresswoman Val Demings. You've said after 33 years of marriage, you've learned a few things. All the guys, including me, who've been married to the wife, nod their heads because we've all learned a few things. What have you learned?
Well, I've learned that you don't have to be right in every situation. And and that, I'm mature enough at this point to know that you look for a life partner and you grow together. You pray together. You learn together. You support one another.
Doesn't she drive a Harley? My question is, do you drive one as well?
Yes, we have two Harley Davidson motorcycles. I've been driving or riding motorcycles for 40 years. My wife started riding a Harley Davidson motorcycle when she was a police captain and she went to special operations. They taught her how to ride a motorcycle, a horse, etc. And so she learned how to ride through the police department. And she's probably been riding now for probably about over 20 years. And so we have these two Harley Davidson motorcycles that, because she's in Washington, D.C. quite a bit, I ride two motorcycles. I ride mine and I ride hers to keep them going. Her schedule just doesn't allow her to ride as often as she would like, but she's an excellent rider, and she's a go-getter. So she rides motorcycles. As I said, she rides horses. She's just waiting on an opportunity, I think, to jump out of a plane. So that's a daredevil that we call a Wonder Woman in our house because we wonder what it's going to be next. So we just go for the ride. It's a wonderful ride that we're on as we are of service to mankind.
You guys are the Barack and Michelle Obama of Orlando. When I hear your story and her story, I'm thinking movie. I see Denzel playing you. I see Viola Davis or someone like that playing her. What do you think about that?
Well, we were asked this question this past Saturday at an event that we were at here in Orlando. And, I kind of graciously said, I don't know who in the world would want to play me, but I suggested that it be Denzel. And my wife we've been places when people would say to my wife that Vanessa Bell Calloway from, Coming to America and other things is, my wife looks very similar to her. But Viola Davis is an excellent actor. And but there was one that this past weekend was suggested, and that was Angela Bassett. Nice. So it seemed to be that more people got excited when they said, it would be Denzel Washington and Angela Bassett. Denzel has played a lot of cops over the years, bad and good. And Angela Bassett, what can I say about Angela Bassett? She's fantastic, and she grew up in Florida over in the St. Petersburg area.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yes, sir.
One of my favorite parts of this show is African Americans You Should Know. We don't always get or give the recognition that's deserved for the contributions we as a people make to society. So every show we close by highlighting a Black American we believe you should know. Check it out. His real name was Edward Kennedy Ellington, but we all knew him as Duke Ellington. Born April 29, 1899, he was raised by two talented musical parents in a middle-class Washington, D.C. neighborhood. He began playing piano as a child and got the nickname Duke. By the time he was 17, he was playing professionally. Eventually, the Duke started composing music, and in 1923, he moved to New York, where he formed his own band. By 1927, he was performing at Harlem's famous Cotton Club, which became a major turning point in his career. Classic Duke Ellington songs include Mood Indigo, Sophisticated Lady, I Got It Bad, and That Ain't Good, Take the A Train, and many more. In his more than 50-year career, Ellington was awarded a number of musical degrees, the Medal of Freedom, as well as a posthumous Pulitzer Prize for Music back in 1999. Duke Ellington passed away May 24, 1974, in New York City at the age of 75. Paul Mooney was a comedic genius and sadly one that we recently lost. Beginning his career telling jokes as a ringmaster with the circus, he eventually became a writer for my friend, the late great Richard Pryor. Initially, Mooney was the head writer for In Living Color, inspiring the unforgettable Homie D. Clown. You may also remember him as a great Negrodamus on the Dave Chappelle Show. Paul Mooney died of a heart attack at his home in Oakland, California on May 19, 2021. He was 79 years old. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was born March 20th, 1915 in Cotton Plant, Arkansas. She gained popularity in the 30s and 40s with her gospel recordings. Her unique mixture of spiritual lyrics and electric guitar was extremely important to the origins of rock and roll. Rosetta Tharpe was the first great recording star of gospel music and among the first gospel musicians to appeal to rhythm and blues and rock and roll audiences. Labeled the godmother of rock and roll, she influenced future rock and roll icons like Little Richard, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Johnny Cash, and many, many more. Her guitar playing was later cited by Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Keith Richards. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was inducted posthumously into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in May of 2018. She died October 9, 1973, in Philadelphia. She was 58 years old. I'd like to thank all of our guests for making this a fantastic season. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching and supporting All Things Men. Have a happy and safe holiday season, and as always, I'm your host, Mark McEwen. Until next time.